The air inside the Sarathi medical deck felt colder than space itself. Everything was white, glowing softly, too clean, too quiet. The lights above hummed in a low rhythm, and the metallic walls reflected the face of the only human there, Captain Elias Varon. His reflection looked tired, the scars on his jaw catching the sterile light. He sat on the edge of the examination bench, shoulders straight but eyes filled with questions he didn't dare to ask. He had faced battlefields, broken starships, and alien pirates before. But this waiting in an alien lab surrounded by machines whispering in languages he couldn't read, felt far more terrifying. Across the room stood Lady Ryla of the Sarathi Dominion. She was unlike anyone Elias had ever met. Her skin shimmered faintly like polished silver, and her eyes glowed a soft violet, deep and unreadable. Every movement she made was graceful, practiced, as though she'd spent her entire life learning how to appear calm when she was anything but. "You must forgive the delay, Captain," she said finally, her voice smooth but distant. The translator chip at her neck echoed her words in perfect English. "Our systems are cautious when analyzing non-Sarathi blood." Elias managed a small nod. "I'm in no hurry," he lied. In truth, he didn't even know why he had agreed to this test. All he knew was that a few days ago, he had rescued a Sarathi transport from raiders near the Orion Rim. He had taken blaster fire to the arm, but the wound healed almost overnight. The Sarathi doctors had called it unnatural recovery. Then, the lady herself had invited him aboard her flagship Sarathis, with a strange request and a simple blood test, but nothing about this situation felt simple. Lady Ryla walked closer, holding a slender tube of glass filled with shimmering blue liquid. "You do not understand the honor we offer you, human," she said softly. "Few outside our kind are ever tested." Elias gave her a tired smile. "Honor, huh? You make it sound like a promotion." Her expression didn't change, but her eyes softened for a moment, as if she almost smiled. Then she turned away, setting the tube into a machine that pulsed with blue light. He watched her closely. There was something about her presence, fragile and strong at the same time, that made the room feel heavier. She looked like someone carrying too much on her shoulders. Finally, he asked, "What exactly are you testing for?" Ryla hesitated. The translator paused before answering, as if even it sensed the weight of her words. "Compatibility," she said simply. "To see if your blood can merge with ours." Elias frowned. "Merge, you mean like—" "For medicine?" Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. "For survival." The silence that followed was sharp. He didn't understand, not fully, but something inside him, some quiet human instinct, and told him this was more than science. This was desperation. Ryla turned toward him again, her silver fingers clasped tightly in front of her. "You have heard of our people, yes? The Sarathi Dominion, the old empire that once spanned 50 systems?" "Yeah," he said. "And I heard it's falling apart." She didn't deny it. "Our bloodlines are fading. Generations of cloning have weakened us. Our bodies reject our own genetics. Every year, fewer children are born alive." Her voice wavered just slightly on that last word. "We search for compatible DNA, something untouched by our failures. Your kind, the Daps, evolves faster than any other known species. So you think my blood could fix that?" Elias asked quietly. Ryla looked straight at him now, her violet eyes shimmering with something close to hope. Or fear. "Perhaps. You may be the last possibility. The final chance to restore what is dying." He leaned back slowly, the metal seat creaking under his weight. "I didn't come here to be anyone's experiment, Lady Ryla." Her expression softened. "Nor do I wish to make you one. But my people have no time left, and I—" She stopped, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. "I have no time left either." Elias looked at her in silence. For all her royal posture, for all the cold light around her, she looked like someone standing at the edge of extinction, desperate to hold on. When the medic drone entered to collect the sample, Elias didn't resist. He offered his arm, watching the needle pierce his skin, the red human blood mixing with faint blue light in the tube. Ryla stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the vial as if it held her future. "When the results come," she whispered, "everything may change." Elias gave a small nod. "Yeah," he said quietly, "for both of us." And as the drone floated away with the sample, Neither of them spoke again, but deep inside both felt the same strange pull, a feeling that destiny had just started to breathe. The Sarathi were dying, not slowly like old trees with leaves that fall one by one, but like stars collapsing too quickly, leaving nothing but black silence behind. Lady Ryla's people had once been powerful, rulers of dozens of star systems, explorers and inventors who had shaped the galaxy with their brilliance. But centuries of wars, overbreeding, and reliance on cloned bloodlines had weakened them. Now the survival of her species rested on a single fragile thread, and that thread was her. Every day Ryla walked the halls of the cruiser Sarathis, watching her people move silently past her. Soldiers who once fought alongside kings now stared at her with quiet desperation. Scientists who had mapped the stars now could only measure their own failures. The weight of centuries of extinction pressed down on every step she took, and every time she looked in the mirror, she saw it reflected back. The glow of silver skin, the faint violet shimmer in her eyes, and the silent fear that she could not survive much longer. Her ancestors had built machines to preserve life, temples to honor the old ways, and libraries that recorded every discovery of the Sarathi. Yet now all their efforts could not save her people. The genetic line was failing. No child had survived the last 5 cycles of births. The Sarathi doctors whispered of blood decay, a fatal weakening of their chromosomes, and no medicine or ritual could stop it. When the human had arrived, Captain Elias Varen, a spark of hope ignited within her. He was unlike any Sarathi. His body healed quickly, adapted quickly, and survived conditions that would have killed her soldiers. He was strong, resilient, and stubborn in ways her people no longer remembered. And yet he was human, fragile in his own ways, different in ways she could not fully understand. She remembered the first time she had seen him on the bridge of her ship. He stood calmly as alarms blared, the ship shaking from a skirmish in the asteroid belt. While her people panicked, he remained steady, moving with a confidence born from countless battles. There was something in him that spoke to the core of life itself, a stubborn refusal to break, a determination to survive against impossible odds. Ryla had watched him heal wounds that would have taken her entire team of medics hours to stabilize. His cells adapted to alien toxins. His muscles rebuilt themselves faster than machines could repair. The Sarathi scientists had whispered that humans were an anomaly of nature, but Ryla had seen it as more. A chance. And now, with the blood test complete, that chance was the last she had. The results would determine not just her own life, but the future of her species. If the blood matched, it could bond with hers in a fusion that might restore their failing genes, creating a new line strong enough to survive. If it didn't, there would be no more Sarathi. She walked the quiet corridors to the lab where the results would arrive. Her silver hands clasped the sides of her cloak, her heart beating faster than it had in years. Each step felt like carrying the weight of generations, each breath a reminder that time was slipping away. The crew avoided her gaze, bowing their heads as she passed. They did not fear her. They feared the end of their line, and she was the only one who could prevent it. She had trained her whole life for leadership, diplomacy, and survival, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. Nothing could have prepared her for asking a human, a stranger, to carry the hope of her dying people in his veins. In the quiet of her chamber, she placed her hands over her chest, feeling the faint pulse of life that had been weakening over the years. Her thoughts drifted to her ancestors, to the glories of the past, and to the weight of her responsibility. She whispered to herself almost like a prayer, "Please, let this work. Let him be the one." Her voice trembled as she remembered the stories of humans she had heard from travelers, stories of courage, compassion, and resilience. She had doubted at first whether someone so different could truly help, but Elias Varen was no ordinary human. He had survived what her people could not. He had faced dangers her soldiers would flee from, and now he held their last hope. She turned to look out of the observation window at the stars streaking past. The galaxy was vast, endless, and indifferent, yet in its cold expanse a small thread of hope glimmered. A human, a Sarathi, and a future that might yet be written. Ryla inhaled sharply. Soon the results would arrive, and soon she would have to face the possibility that her last hope was standing right in front of her, unaware of the weight of the life he might save. Her hands shook as she thought of him. Her voice, soft and trembling, carried words she had not yet spoken aloud. Words meant only for herself. May he be the one. May he be the one who carries us forward. And in that quiet, cold chamber, under the hum of the ship's engines, the fate of an entire species hung in the balance, resting on the blood of a human who had no idea how much he was needed. The days stretched endlessly aboard the Sarathas, each one heavier than the last. Captain Elias Varon spent them wandering the empty corridors, lifting his arms to test his muscles, trying to feel normal. But normal no longer existed. Every glance from the Sarathi crew reminded him that he was different, that his very presence was tied to the fate of a species he barely understood. Lady Ryla, meanwhile, moved silently through her world of glowing walls and humming machines. She avoided the human at first, afraid her presence would remind him of the weight he bore. She had never wanted a savior, only hope. And yet, every time she watched him train or heal faster than any machine could repair, she felt a strange sense of admiration and guilt. He didn't belong here. No human did. And yet somehow he was exactly what they all needed. In the observation decks, Elias would watch the stars streak past, lost in thought. He had fought in countless battles, seen death in every shape and form, yet the thought of failing this test terrified him in a new way. It wasn't his life at stake. It was the lives of millions of people he had never met. He clenched his fists, the muscles in his arms straining, as if he could physically carry their burden by force. But he knew better. This was not something muscle or training could fix. At night he could hear whispers in the halls, low conversations in Sarathi, hurried and hushed. The human. The last chance. He may be the one. He did not understand the words fully, but he understood the tone. Hope, fear, desperation. Ryla watched him too, from afar, every time he passed through her chambers. She wanted to speak to him, to explain the gravity of the situation, but fear held her tongue. How could she explain that every heartbeat, every drop of blood, might be the difference between life and extinction? How could she tell him that his very essence might become the foundation of her people's survival? One evening, when the twin suns of her world were just visible through the thick shielding of the ship, Ryla finally approached him. He was in the training bay, punching at the air, letting frustration bleed through his movements. "You should not be doing this alone," she said softly. Her voice, carried through the translator, sounded fragile, almost human. Elias stopped mid-punch, breathing heavily, and turned toward her. "I can't just sit and wait," he replied. "I don't know why everyone's putting me on some pedestal. I'm just a man." Ryla stepped closer, the violet glow of her eyes reflecting in his own. "You are more than that. You may be all we have left." Her hands trembled slightly as she reached out, though she didn't touch him. "I did not ask for this lightly. I asked for your blood, but I also asked for your choice. Freely." Elias looked at her, his chest rising and falling rapidly. He wanted to laugh, to deflect, but her words carried weight he could not ignore. "Choice?" he said quietly. "You think I have one?" "You do," she said. "You can refuse. But understand this. Your decision could be the difference between life and the end. Your blood, your strength, your resilience, they could carry our people forward." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship and the distant stars outside the viewport were the only sounds. Elias felt a strange sense of awe. Humans were not supposed to be important on galactic scales, at least not like this. Yet here he was, holding more than just his own life in his hands. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't even know what it means for me to be part of something like that." Ryla's eyes softened, the faintest shimmer of tears catching the violet light. "I do not know either, but I feel it in every moment I breathe, in every glance at you. You are not just a human. You are hope, and sometimes hope demands courage greater than fear." Elias swallowed hard. He wanted to speak, to say something witty, something human that would lighten the air, but he could not. There was too much truth in her words, too much weight, too much responsibility. And in that moment, something shifted between them. Not trust yet, not understanding, but a fragile connection born from desperation and the undeniable force of life itself. Both of them realized that the result of the blood test would change everything. Yet both also sensed that the waiting, the fear of the unknown, was the hardest battle they had yet to face. Ryla stepped back quietly, leaving him in the glow of the training bay. Elias watched her leave, and for the first time in days he felt a pulse of determination that had nothing to do with his body. It was resolve, human, stubborn, and relentless, because whatever the results would say, he knew one thing. He would face them, and he would face them with her. And somewhere deep in the ship, in the humming of machines and the quiet of the stars, the future of a dying people hung in the balance. The day the results arrived, the Sarathis felt colder than usual. Even the humming of the engines seemed muted, as if the ship itself held its breath. Captain Elias Varon waited in the lab, his hands resting on the smooth metal table, trying to appear calm. But inside his chest felt tight and his pulse had a strange urgent rhythm. He had faced explosions, alien attacks, and near death in war zones. Yet this, the uncertainty of a test, that gripped him tighter than any blaster fire ever had. Lady Ryla stood a few steps away, still and silent, her silver skin catching the faint light, her violet eyes fixed on the floor. She did not speak. She had rehearsed words 100 times in her mind, but now, facing the reality, she found herself unable to speak. This moment carried too much weight. This moment would decide the future of her people. A medic drone rolled in, floating silently with a glowing datapad held carefully between its arms. It hovered near Ryla, its sensors scanning the lab, and then, with precise movements, displayed the results on the pad. Elias leaned forward instinctively, the metallic hum of the machine blending with the pounding of his heart. Ryla reached for the datapad. Her fingers trembled. She knew what she was about to see might either shatter her hope completely or set it aflame. The machine spoke, calm and emotionless, yet its words carried finality. Subject Elias Varon, blood fusion match 99.97% compatible. Adaptive bonding confirmed. Survival rate 98%. Genetic restoration potential maximum. Ryla froze. The datapad slipped slightly in her hands. For a long moment she could not breathe. Her mind raced. Her people could survive. Her line could continue. The impossible had happened. She turned her glowing eyes to Elias, who was staring at her with a mixture of confusion and anticipation. Her lips parted, and a voice she had not expected to hear trembled as it left her mouth. You are my final choice. The words hung in the lab, fragile and weighty all at once. Elias blinked, his mind struggling to process what they meant. He had expected congratulations, medical jargon, or gratitude. He had not expected those words spoken with such raw emotion, with the weight of generations resting on them. Final choice? He repeated, his voice cautious, unsure if he had understood correctly. Ryla stepped closer, her hand still clutching the datapad. Yes, she whispered. You are not just a match. You are everything we hoped for. The blood fusion can restore our line, heal the damage that has weakened us for centuries. Without you, without this, we would die. I would die with them. Elias felt a strange mix of awe and fear. He had never been a hero. He had never wanted to be. Yet here he was, holding the future of a species in his veins. The realization made his stomach tighten, and his hands fidget with the edge of the table. Ryla, I don't know what to say, he admitted softly. I'm just a human. I'm not. You know, her eyes softened. You do not need to be anything else. Your blood is strong. Your spirit, stronger. That is enough. Her voice cracked slightly. We have waited centuries for this. And now, it is here. You are here. Elias looked at her then, really looked, and saw the exhaustion behind her regal composure. The hope mingled with fear, the weight she carried alone. He realized that she did not see him as a stranger or a tool. She saw him as life itself, as the bridge between her dying world and the future they both could share. The silence stretched. Machines hummed, lights glowed softly, and the stars outside the viewport moved in perfect rhythm. For a moment nothing else existed but the two of them, the blood test and the fragile thread of hope that now connected them. Finally, Ryla lowered the datapad, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for his. If we do this, she said softly, almost pleading, we can bring my people back. You are the one I trusted, the one I chose, to carry us forward. Elias swallowed hard. He wanted to say something, anything, that could ease the tension, that could reassure her. But words felt small, meaningless against the weight of her gaze and the promise of new life resting on him. Instead, he nodded, slowly, deliberately. "Then we do this," he said. His voice was steady, though inside he felt the surge of fear, hope, and responsibility all at once. Together. Ryla's eyes glimmered with unshed tears, the violet hue brighter than ever. "Together," she whispered. And in that silent lab aboard the Sarathis, the impossible became real. The last hope of a dying people stood before them, and for the first time in centuries the Sarathi dared to dream of a future. Captain Elias Varen could feel the weight of the universe pressing down on him. The lab, once cold and empty, now seemed suffocating. Machines hummed softly around him, lights blinking, recording, calculating while he stood frozen. The results had confirmed it. His blood was compatible. He could save the Sarathi. He could save Lady Ryla, but he had never signed up for this. He rubbed his face with both hands, the simple action grounding him in a world that suddenly felt surreal. He had faced death countless times, in war zones, on damaged ships, against pirates and monsters alike. But never like this. Never with the future of an entire species resting on his veins. He was just a human, stubborn and adaptive, yes, but not divine, not a savior. And yet here he was, about to be asked to merge his blood with hers, to risk everything about himself in the process. Ryla entered the room quietly. Her steps were measured, elegant, almost hesitant. She did not touch him at first. She simply stood a few feet away, her glowing violet eyes fixed on his face. She could see the conflict raging inside him, the same fear she had fought for centuries to hide within herself. "You are thinking too much," she said softly, her translator carrying her voice in calm tones. "It is natural, but you must decide soon." Elias looked up at her, his eyes dark with turmoil. "Decide?" he repeated. "Ryla, do you understand what this means? I don't know what happens to me after this. I could lose everything that makes me, me." She took a step closer, her hands clasped in front of her. "And yet, if you do nothing, we all lose everything. Our people, our future, me. I cannot do this alone." Her voice trembled, almost breaking, and he felt the weight of her words settle like stones on his chest. "I'm not afraid of pain," he said, his voice quiet, almost bitter. "I'm afraid of what I'll become. I don't even know if I'll survive the process, and if I do, if I'm no longer fully human, will you still see me as me?" Ryla's eyes softened. She stepped closer, until the faint glow of her skin brushed against the edge of his perception. "Elias, you are human, yes, but you are also so much more. Your strength, your resilience, your stubborn refusal to break, that is what makes you perfect for this. I do not ask you to stop being you. I ask you to allow life to continue, to give my people a chance." He shook his head, trying to dismiss her words, but he could not. She wasn't commanding him. She wasn't pleading out of desperation. She was showing him trust, raw, fragile, and impossible to ignore. "I didn't ask for this," he whispered, his voice tight with emotion. "I didn't come here to carry the fate of a species. I came to help, yes, but not like this. Not like this. And yet you are here," Ryla said gently, "because you are stronger than you know. Because humans are extraordinary." She reached out her hand, trembling, almost begging him to meet her gaze. "You can choose, but understand, the choice is not just yours. The choice is ours. Ours together." Elias stared at her hand, then back into her eyes. He saw centuries of fear, centuries of responsibility, and centuries of hope reflected there. For the first time, he understood what HFY, humanity Funyar, truly meant. Humans were flawed, fragile, and imperfect, but their strength was in their will, their courage, their refusal to break no matter how impossible the odds. He began, swallowing hard. His throat felt tight. "I don't know if I'm ready, but I can't let your people die, and I can't let you face this alone." Ryla's eyes glimmered, a mixture of relief and disbelief. "Then we do this," she said softly, almost reverently. "Together." Elias nodded slowly. He felt fear and determination clash violently within him. He did not know what the process would demand of his body or his mind. He did not know if he would survive or if he would remain fully human afterward. But he did know one thing: he would not step back. He would not fail. Ryla reached out and finally touched his arm gently. The warmth of her hand sent a jolt through him, a spark of connection that was deeper than he had expected. He felt the weight of generations, of a dying world, pressing into him. but also felt the pull of something more: trust, hope, and an unspoken bond forming between them. "I don't know what happens next," he admitted, "but I'm with you." Ryla nodded, her eyes shining like the last stars of a dying galaxy. "That is all I ask. That is all we need: courage, trust, and hope. Nothing more, nothing less." And in that moment, as their gazes locked, Elias realized that sometimes being human meant facing impossible odds. It meant risking everything for something greater than yourself. And sometimes it meant standing beside someone who carried the fate of an entire species, knowing that together, you could be enough. The chamber was silent except for the hum of the machines and the faint thrum of the ship's engines. Captain Elias Varen stood in the center, arms at his sides, every muscle tense. Across from him, Lady Ryla glowed faintly, her violet eyes reflecting both fear and hope. The air between them felt electric, heavy with expectation, as if the very atmosphere was holding its breath. The medics, a mix of Sarathi scientists and hovering drones, moved with precise coordination, preparing the chamber for the blood fusion process. Elias felt a cold prickle of fear along his spine. This was no ordinary medical procedure. It was life-altering, body-altering, the kind of event that could end everything in seconds if something went wrong. "Are you ready?" Ryla asked softly. Her voice trembled, though she tried to hide it behind the calm, regal tone that had carried her through centuries of responsibility. Elias swallowed hard. I think so," he said, though the words barely carried his conviction. "I don't know what happens, but I trust you, and I trust myself, I guess." Ryla's hand reached for his, and for the first time Elias felt the weight of her touch. It was warm, grounding, almost human in its simplicity. Yet in that warmth he could sense the entire history of her people. The desperation, the hope, the centuries of survival that now rested in that single gesture. "Then we begin," she whispered. The fusion chamber glowed, a soft azure light filling the room. Tubes extended from the walls, connecting to both of them without pain, without harsh restraint. When the first wave of energy surged through Elias, he gasped. It was like heat and cold at the same time, a tingling fire that coursed through every vein, every cell. His body vibrated, not painfully but unnaturally, as though each molecule of his being was waking, stretching, remembering how to survive in ways it never had before. Ryla cried out softly as her own energy responded. The light around her intensified, bathing the chamber in a golden-blue radiance that flickered with each pulse. Elias could feel her presence in him, not just physically but in every heartbeat, every breath. It was strange, disorienting, and beautiful all at once. "Focus on me," she whispered, her voice trembling through his mind and through the translator. "We are together. Breathe with me. Feel with me." Elias did as she said. He let go of the panic, the fear, and for the first time let himself be present in the moment. He felt the energy of her blood intertwine with his own. He felt the adaptive cells in his body responding to hers, rebuilding, repairing, evolving. Pain surged briefly, sharp and raw, but he gritted his teeth and held still. The fear of death was there, but the will to protect, the human stubbornness that had carried him through countless battles, burned stronger. Time became meaningless. Seconds stretched into eternity, and in that endless moment Elias could feel a connection unlike anything he had ever known. He felt the centuries of Sarathi suffering, the lives of countless generations, and the fragile hope for the future, all merging with his own essence. He felt Ryla's fear, her courage, her silent prayers, and he understood. This was not just survival. This was life reborn. Ryla's hand tightened over his, and he realized she was crying. But they were tears of relief, of wonder, of trust. Their bodies hummed with shared energy, their minds linked in fleeting flashes of thought, emotion, and instinct. Elias saw not just the glowing chamber, not just the machines and the stars outside, but a vision of the future. Sarathi children laughing, forests of crystal swaying in windless skies, a people alive once more. Finally, the light began to fade. The surging energy ebbed, leaving behind a quiet warmth, a pulse of life that was stronger, steadier, fuller. Elias collapsed to his knees, exhausted but alive, his chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. Ryla knelt beside him, still glowing faintly, her hand on his shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "We did it. You saved me." Elias managed a weak smile. "I think we saved everyone." She laughed softly, a sound like silver wind through crystal trees, and rested her forehead against his. "Yes," she whispered. "We are enough." And in that moment, as the chamber quieted and the stars outside continued to streak across the void, Elias realized something profound. Humanity was fragile, yes, and flawed, but in courage, in stubbornness, in hope, humanity could endure. Humanity could give life when the galaxy had already given up. Ryla looked into his eyes, violet meeting human blue, and smiled through her tears. "You are not just my choice," she said. "You are the future." Elias felt a lump in his throat. He nodded, unable to speak. He did not need words. In the glow of the chamber, in the bond they had forged, he understood. Together they had done the impossible. Humanity, in all its stubborn glory, had saved a species from extinction. The twin suns of the Sarathi homeworld rose slowly over the horizon, their light spilling across crystal forests and gleaming temples. For the first time in centuries, life seemed to breathe again. Children's laughter echoed in the streets, the songs of birds and wind across crystalline leaves filling the air. The people of the Sarathi walked taller, their steps lighter, their eyes brighter. A future they had thought impossible now stretched before them, like a living tapestry. Captain Elias Varon stood at the edge of the observation balcony of the palace, his hands resting lightly on the railing. The sun's glow reflected off the faint metallic sheen of his skin, a subtle sign of the bond formed during the blood fusion process. He felt different, yes, stronger, faster, more connected to life than ever before. But he still felt human, stubbornly human, and it made him smile. Lady Ryla approached, her presence calm yet radiant. Her eyes, still violet but now flecked with shades of blue, met his. There was a quiet pride in her gaze, a mixture of gratitude and something deeper, something unspoken. She had been a princess burdened by extinction and despair, and now she was a queen in a reborn world, standing beside the human who had carried that world in his veins. "You could have gone home," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. Elias shook his head, the corners of his lips lifting into a small, genuine smile. "Maybe I already did," he replied. He glanced at the horizon, at the young Sarathi children running freely, at the elders laughing and telling stories, and at the vibrant forests that had seemed doomed just days ago. "I think this is home too." Ryla stepped closer, placing her hand gently over his. The pulse beneath her touch matched his own in a way that was almost miraculous, almost perfect. "Then stay," she said, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Stay not as a savior, not as a hero, but as one of us. As the first of a new beginning." Elias looked down at her hand on his, then back at her glowing eyes. He could see the weight of responsibility that had lifted from her shoulders, the relief that washed over her like sunlight breaking through clouds. And in that moment he understood something profound. Humans were fragile, yes, and prone to mistakes, but in courage, in stubbornness, in love and compassion, they could change the course of history. "I never asked for glory," he said quietly. "I didn't come here to save a species. I just did what I could. And somehow, it worked." Ryla smiled softly, the faint shimmer of her silver skin catching the morning light. "It worked because you dared to try, because humans do not give up, even when the odds are impossible. That is why you are my choice. That is why the future is ours." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of life around them a symphony of hope. Elias realized that in saving her people he had discovered something far greater than any battlefield victory: connection, responsibility, the power of choosing to act when it mattered most. "Do you feel it?" Ryla asked, her voice gentle, almost whispering. "The bond, not just in blood but in everything?" Elias nodded. "I do. It's strange and beautiful, like life itself is brighter somehow." She reached for his arm, and this time he took her hand without hesitation. Together they walked down to the palace gardens, where Sarathi elders and children alike were celebrating life renewed. The people bowed not just out of respect but out of genuine gratitude. Their future, once uncertain and fading, now stood before them like a living promise. As they walked, Ryla whispered, "You are not just my choice, Elias. You are the bridge between our species, between hope and survival. You are humanity, and humanity has never failed." Elias felt a warmth he had never known, not from the sun nor the blood fusion, but from this moment, from the knowledge that his stubborn will, his human flaws, and his resilience had mattered in a way no weapon or warship ever could. He looked at Ryla, and then at the children laughing among the crystalline trees, and realized the truth of it. Life in all its forms depended on courage, on determination, on the refusal to give up. And humanity, chaotic, stubborn, fragile, and brilliant, could tip the scales of the universe. Ryla squeezed his hand, her smile radiant, her voice filled with certainty. "You are my final choice, and together we will write the next chapter." Elias returned her smile, feeling a profound pride in being human. "Then let's write it," he said, and for the first time, he truly understood what it meant to be a part of something bigger than himself. And as the twin suns rose fully, casting their golden light across a reborn world, humanity had proved once again, its stubborn, flawed, but unbreakable, that it could inspire life, hope, and survival even across the stars.